Hartwell, Georgia, seemed like a place where time had stopped somewhere in the middle of the last century. With a population of 4,000, it had one main street lined with shops that had been passed down from generation to generation, and everyone knew everyone else. Here, people were judged not by their actions, but by their last name and how long their family had lived in the area. The Carter family was one of the oldest in town. Ron's grandfather worked in the cotton fields, and his father ran a small farm equipment repair shop. Ron Carter himself, at 48, was known in town as a skilled mechanic with a tough personality. Tall, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and perpetually furrowed brows, he embodied the image of a true old-school Southern man. His wife, Linda, worked as a nurse at the local hospital. A quiet, neat woman of 45, she always stayed in her husband's shadow, as was expected in their circles. They had a daughter, Amy, a fair-haired girl with gray eyes who had felt out of place since early childhood. The first signs that something was wrong with Amy appeared when she was 7 years old. She refused to wear the dresses her mother bought her, preferring the jeans and t-shirts of her older cousins. When the neighborhood children played house, Amy always wanted to be the dad or the son, but never the daughter or the mom. "It's just a phase," Linda reassured herself, when 8-year-old Amy asked to have her hair cut short, like a boy's. Ron was more categorical. "No boys' haircuts. She's a girl. Let her act like a girl." But the phase didn't pass. As a teenager, Amy became even more withdrawn. She avoided school events and didn't participate in girls' conversations about boys and cosmetics. Instead, she spent her time in her father's workshop, enthusiastically studying the workings of engines and helping with repairs. "At least she's useful," Ron grumbled, but deep down he was proud of his daughter's technical abilities. He just didn't understand why she always looked so unhappy, especially when people called her by her name or used female pronouns. At 16, Amy heard the word transgender for the first time in social studies class. The teacher, a young woman from Atlanta, cautiously explained various aspects of gender identity to the class. Most of the students giggled or grimaced in disgust, but for Amy, it was a revelation. For the first time in her life, she heard that what she was feeling had a name and that she wasn't alone. At home, she tried to talk to her mother about it. Linda listened, turning pale with every word. When Amy finished, her mother was silent for a long time, then said, "Honey, maybe you should talk to Pastor Davis. Sometimes the devil sends us temptations that seem right." The conversation with her father happened a year later, when Amy turned 17. She gathered her courage and told him that she wanted to be called by a boy's name, Alex. Ron's reaction was explosive. "What do you mean, Alex?" he barked, throwing down the wrench he was holding. "You're my daughter, a girl. God made you a woman, and don't you dare insult him by making up nonsense." "Dad, I'm not making this up. I've always felt like a boy. Always. You've seen it." "Seen it? Seen you disgracing our family. Seen the neighbors whispering behind our backs. The Carters have a strange daughter, they say. And now you want to make it even worse?" Amy, now she mentally called herself Alex, tried to explain, but her father wouldn't listen. He forbade her to spread this heresy in their home and threatened to send her to a psychiatrist to cure her of this illness. Relationships in the family became extremely tense. Alex withdrew even more, and Ron started drinking. He always drank with his friends on weekends, but now a bottle of beer became his constant companion after work. Linda was torn between her husband and her child, not knowing how to help either of them. The climax came in the spring when Alex turned 18. At the local bar, the Horseshoe, a group of young men from a neighboring town began to taunt the Carter family, calling Alex a pervert and a half-wit. Ron, already quite drunk, couldn't take it anymore. The fight was brutal. Ron beat up the ringleader so badly that the guy was taken to the hospital with a broken jaw and a concussion. 2 of his friends also had to be hospitalized. When the police arrived, Ron was still standing over one of them with bloodied fists, shouting something about protecting his family's honor. The trial lasted 2 months. The lawyer tried to get a suspended sentence, arguing that Ron was defending his family's honor, but the judge was unyielding. Aggravated assault and grievous bodily harm, 4 years in prison. On the day of sentencing, Ron looked at his son, He could never bring himself to think of Alex as a daughter, with such hatred that he felt physically cold. "This is because of you," Ron hissed as he was led away in handcuffs. "Because of your perversions, you destroyed our family." After the trial, Linda filed for divorce. She could no longer bear the judgmental stares of her neighbors and colleagues. Alex, meanwhile, began the process of changing his documents and planned to start hormone therapy as soon as he had enough money. In his letters from prison, Ron referred to his son only by his old name, refusing to acknowledge his new identity. The letters became increasingly aggressive, filled with religious fanaticism and threats. "When I get back," he wrote in his last letter, "I'll fix what you've done to yourself, no matter what it takes." Linda stopped showing Alex the letters, but she couldn't sleep at night thinking about what would happen when Ron was released. He still had 2 years left to serve, but she had already started planning her escape from Hartwell as soon as her son finished college. Alex also dreamed of escape. He studied hard, worked at a local cafe on weekends, and saved money to move to a big city where he could start a new life, a place where no one knew his family's history, where he could just be himself. But Hartwell held its children tight, and sometimes, watching the sun set behind the Georgia hills, Alex felt that this town would never let him go. A year and a half had passed since Ron's imprisonment, and life in Hartwell was gradually returning to normal. Alex woke up every morning at 6:30, took a shower, and looked at his reflection in the mirror. The hormone therapy he had started 8 months ago was already showing results. His voice had deepened, a faint stubble had appeared on his face, and his figure was becoming more angular. Every morning, he saw in the mirror more and more of the person he had always felt himself to be inside. He earned the money for his therapy at the Magnolia Cafe on Main Street. The owner, an elderly Mrs. Jenkins, was initially suspicious of his transformation, but gradually got used to it. Alex was a reliable employee. He always arrived on time, was polite to customers, and never caused any trouble. "This boy is good," she told her friends, although at first she found it difficult to use masculine pronouns. "He's a hard worker, not like those good-for-nothing kids from high school." The cafe's customers reacted in different ways. The older regulars frowned when they saw his short haircut and men's clothes, but they got used to ordering coffee from him without comment. The college kids were more tolerant. Some even supported his choice. His most unexpected ally was Reverend James Walker of the Methodist Church. The 55-year-old pastor, with a graying beard and kind eyes behind horn-rimmed glasses, was a stark contrast to the old Pastor Davis, who had retired the year before. Walker had come to Hartwell from Savannah, where he had worked with the homeless and drug addicts. His views on Christianity were more progressive than the locals were used to. When he heard about Alex, he asked to meet him. "My son," he said when they met in his office at the church, "I know you're going through a difficult time. I want you to know that the doors of our church are open to you." Alex expected another lecture on sin and repentance, but Reverend Walker surprised him. "God created us all in his own image," the pastor continued, "and if you feel that your true nature is to be a man, who am I to argue with God's plan?" For the first time in a long time, Alex felt that an adult understood him. He didn't become a regular at the church, but he did drop in on Reverend Walker from time to time just to talk. The pastor became something of a mentor and protector for him in the conservative town. Not everyone shared Reverend Walker's tolerance. A group of particularly religious parishioners, led by Mr. Howell, the owner of a hardware store, regularly wrote complaints to the diocese demanding that the liberal pastor be removed. They distributed leaflets calling for a boycott of the Magnolia Cafe because a pervert worked there. "Our town has always been Christian," Howell said at town council meetings. "We can't let sinful influences corrupt our children." Alex tried to ignore the sidelong glances and whispers behind his back. In college, he studied information technology, dreaming of one day finding a job in Atlanta or even further away in California, where people were more open-minded. Linda struggled to adjust to the changes in her son. Every evening when he came home from work or school, she saw him becoming more and more like a young man. A mother's heart rejoiced that her child finally looked happy, but at the same time, she mourned the daughter she had lost. "Mom, I'm fine," Alex would say when he noticed her sad look. "I'm the same person. I just finally get to be myself." Linda worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, trying to support her family without her husband's help. Her co-workers treated her with sympathy. They all knew about Ron's imprisonment and the problem with their child. The chief physician, Dr. Martinez, was the only one who openly supported Alex. Gender dysphoria is a medical diagnosis, he explained to Linda. Your son is receiving the right treatment. You should be proud of that. But not all of her colleagues shared Dr. Martinez's opinion. Nurse Gloria Simmons, who had worked at the hospital for 30 years, openly expressed her disapproval. We didn't have these problems in my day, she said. Kids knew who they were and didn't make up nonsense. Ron's letters arrived every week. At first, Linda read them to Alex, but the content became increasingly disturbing. Ron wrote about how he would correct his mistake as soon as he was released. He quoted Bible verses about man and woman being created by God and promised to cure his daughter of this disease. I've talked to other inmates, he wrote in one letter. They told me methods for curing children of perversions. When I get home, everything will be as it was before. Amy will be the girl God created her to be. Linda stopped showing the letters to her son, but she couldn't sleep at night. She knew Ron was serious about his threats. In prison, he had become even more religiously fanatical than he had been before his incarceration. Alex knew his mother was hiding his father's letters from him, but he didn't press the issue. He tried not to think about the day Ron would be released. There were still 2.5 years left on his sentence, enough time to finish college and save up money to move. In the spring, Alex filed paperwork to change his name on official documents. The process was complicated and required a court order, but an Atlanta lawyer specializing in LGBT rights agreed to help for a small fee. The process has become easier in Georgia in recent years, the lawyer explained over the phone. But in small towns, judges can sometimes be conservative. Be prepared for possible complications. The hearing was scheduled for the end of the summer. Alex was nervous but hoped that Judge Harrison, who was handling his case, would be understanding. Reverend Walker promised to come to court as a character witness. Life went on as usual at the cafe. Alex learned to ignore the disapproving looks and focus on his work. He dreamed of the day when he could leave Hartwell for good. He researched transgender student programs at universities in other states online and read stories of people who had successfully transitioned. One day, he thought as he served coffee to another customer, I'll live in a place where no one knows me, where I can just be Alex. But Hartwell was a small town with a long memory, and as long as the man who believed he had the right to decide who his child should be was in prison, dreams of freedom seemed very distant. In a Georgia state prison, 200 miles from Hartwell, Ron Carter was counting down the days until his release. He regularly attended the prison chapel, where the local chaplain held services. Ron became one of the most active members of the congregation, reading the Bible every day and participating in Bible study groups. But his interpretation of Scripture became increasingly radical. He saw himself as a father whom God had given a mission to save his daughter from sin. Other inmates shunned him when he began talking about the perversions of the modern world and the need for a father's strong hand. The prison social worker, Mrs. Patterson, noted in his file, the inmate shows signs of religious fanaticism. Psychological counseling is recommended prior to release. But Ron refused to see a psychologist, claiming that his mental health was fine and that the problems were in his family. He wrote letters not only to his family, but also to Reverend Davis, his old pastor who had retired. Davis sometimes replied, supporting Ron's conservative views on family roles and biblical morality. Hang in there, son, the old pastor wrote. The Lord tests us, but the faithful will endure all temptations. Your daughter has strayed, but with God's help, you can bring her back to the right path. These letters reinforced Ron's belief that he was right. He began making plans for after his release. In his mind, it was simple. He would return home, make Amy stop this game, and restore a normal Christian family. Ron chose to ignore the fact that his child had been living as Alex for a year, taking hormones and preparing to officially change her documents. In his letters, Alex remained a lost daughter who needed to be saved from modern perversions. The summer in Hartwell was hot and humid. Alex worked extra shifts at the cafe, saving money for legal fees and the upcoming move. He noticed that some people in town had started to treat him with more tolerance. Perhaps time was healing wounds, or maybe habit was making the strange seem ordinary. But he also knew that not everything had changed. Sometimes, when he walked past Howell's hardware store, he heard loud conversations about the decline of morals and the need to protect children from bad influences. And his father's letters, though his mother never showed them to him, continued to arrive every week, reminding him that there were still many trials ahead. Monday, October 15th, began as usual. Detective Sarah Coleman sat in her office at the county police station, reviewing reports of minor offenses from the weekend. At 38, she was one of 3 detectives in the county, and the only woman in the position. After moving to Hartwell from Atlanta 5 years ago following her divorce, she quickly earned a reputation as a competent and fair officer. Sarah had known the Carter family even before Ron's arrest. Like everyone else in the small town, she had been following the situation with their child. Unlike many of her colleagues, she was understanding toward Alex. Her own niece in Atlanta was a lesbian, and Sarah knew how difficult it could be for people who didn't fit into traditional molds. The phone call came at 9:23 a.m. Sergeant Thompson's voice was tense. "Sarah, we have a problem. The state prison is on the line. Ron Carter escaped last night." The detective felt a chill run down her spine. She immediately picked up the phone and connected with the prison administration. "Detective Coleman, Hartwell County Police. Tell me about Ron Carter's escape." The assistant warden, Captain Rodriguez, spoke in a dry, official tone. Carter did not show up for morning roll call at 6 a.m. A search of his cell revealed that he had cut a hole in the wall and passed through the ventilation system. According to preliminary information, the escape occurred between midnight and 4 a.m. "He only had 2 weeks left to serve," said Sarah. "Why did he decide to escape now?" "We're surprised too. Carter hasn't been in trouble for the last 6 months, but," the captain paused. "Our psychologist noted signs of obsessive behavior related to his family situation. He regularly wrote letters home, the content of which became increasingly disturbing." Sarah wrote down every word. "What kind of threats did he make?" "There were no threats as such, but he spoke of his intention to fix the situation with his child at any cost. We recommended a psychological evaluation, but he refused." After talking to the prison, Sarah immediately went to the Carter family home. She knew Ron could only have 2 goals, either to flee the state or to resolve the family problem once and for all. Linda Carter opened the door as soon as Sarah knocked. Her pale face showed that she already knew the news. "They called half an hour ago," Linda said, letting the detective into the house. "They said Ron had escaped." "Where's Alex now?" Sarah asked immediately. "He's at college. He has lectures until 3. Then he works at a cafe until 9. Linda nervously fiddled with the edge of her apron. "Detective, do you think he could really hurt himself?" Sarah sat down opposite Linda on the sofa. "Mrs. Carter, I need to ask you about the letters from your husband. What exactly did he write?" Linda stood up and took a stack of envelopes out of a desk drawer. "I stopped showing them to Alex 3 months ago. The content was getting too scary." Sarah read the last few letters. In them, Ron described detailed plans for re-educating the child, including forced therapy and even physical punishment. In one letter, he wrote, "Sometimes a father has to take harsh measures to save a child's soul. The Bible says, 'He who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him from childhood.'" "Mrs. Carter, you should have shown these letters to the police earlier," Sarah said. "They contain direct threats." "I know, but he's Alex's father. I thought maybe he was just letting off steam and would cool down when he got out." "We need to get your son to safety immediately. I'll send a patrol to the college and the cafe. You and Alex need to leave town for a few days." Linda nodded, but Sarah could see that she was in shock. "Do you have any relatives or friends in other cities?" "My sister lives in Savannah, but Detective Ron could show up anywhere. He knows where to look." Sarah understood that law enforcement was limited in what it could do. They could provide patrols, but not round-the-clock security. And Ron Carter knew Hartwell like the back of his hand. Alex was sitting in a programming class at college when a security guard entered the auditorium and asked him to go to the dean's office. Detective Coleman was waiting for him there. "Alex, I have some important news for you," Sarah began. "Your father escaped from prison last night." The young man's face turned pale. He listened silently as the detective explained the necessary precautions. "Could he really try to hurt me?" Alex asked in a quiet voice. "I can't say for sure, but his letters contain threats. We can't risk your safety." Alex nodded. In the past year and a half, he had learned to cope with difficulties, but the thought that his own father could be a threat to his life was too frightening. "What should I do?" "Right now, you're going to go home to your mother. We'll arrange temporary shelter for you. And Alex." Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. "If you see your father or anything suspicious, call the police immediately. Don't try to talk to him on your own." At the Magnolia Cafe, Mrs. Jenkins waited anxiously for news. She already knew about the escape. News traveled fast in a small town. When Detective Coleman came in to warn her, the elderly woman was ready to talk. "That boy is a good boy," she said. "If his father really wants to hurt him, he's crazy. Alex hasn't done anything wrong to anyone." "Can you remember if anyone has been in recently asking about Alex?" Mrs. Jenkins thought for a moment. "A strange man came by last week. He said he was a friend of the Carter family and asked how Amy was doing. I corrected him and told him his name was Alex, and he looked at me strangely." Sarah became alert. "Can you describe this man?" "Average height, thin, dark hair. He didn't sound like he was from around here, maybe northern Georgia. He was dressed casually, jeans and a plaid shirt." The detective wrote down the description. It could have been one of Ron's accomplices or someone he knew from prison who was casing the place. Reverend Walker learned of the escape from one of his parishioners and immediately went to the Carter's house. He found Linda and Alex there, packing their things to leave. "My son," he said to Alex, "I want you to know that our entire community is praying for your safety." "Reverend, what if he really finds me? What if—" Alex's voice trembled. "The Lord protects the innocent," replied the pastor. "And you have people who care about you. You are not alone." Walker took a small cross on a chain from his pocket. "This belonged to my father. Wear it until this is over. Not as a symbol of religion, but as a reminder that good is stronger than evil." That evening, an impromptu family council gathered at the Carter's house. Sarah explained the plan. Linda and Alex would go to her sister's house in Savannah for a few days while the police searched for Ron. A patrol car would be stationed outside the house, and all the places Alex frequented had been warned of the possible danger. "What if he doesn't show up here?" Linda asked. "What if he just ran away to another state?" "Then in a few days you can go back to your normal life," Sarah replied. "But judging by his letters, he's obsessed with fixing Alex. People like that rarely give up on their plans." Late that evening, after Linda and Alex had left, Sarah patrolled the streets of Hartwell. The town seemed normal. Quiet streets lit by a few streetlights, closed shops, a few cars outside the local bar. But the detective knew that somewhere in the darkness, a man was hiding, ready to do anything to fulfill his twisted version of a father's love. At a motel on the outskirts of a neighboring town, a man in dark clothes paid cash for a room for the night. He gave a false name and said he was heading north on business. The sleepy clerk barely glanced at him. In the room, the man took some photographs out of his bag. One showed a little girl with light hair and a pink dress. The other showed the same child, older, now dressed as a boy with short hair. He looked at the photographs for a long time, then carefully put them back. From another compartment of his bag, he took out a Bible and began to read familiar verses about a father's duty and a child's obedience. Some lines were underlined in red. On the table lay Hartwell's map with marked locations: the house on Maple Street, the Magnolia Cafe, the college building. The plan was simple and precise. Tomorrow he would return home and fulfill his duty as a son, no matter how painful it might be. In Savannah, Alex couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch at Aunt Mary's house, listening to the sound of the surf in the distance and thinking about his life. Just a year ago, his biggest problem was saving money for hormone therapy. Now he was hiding from his own father, who could hurt him. "Mom," he called softly to Linda, who was sitting by the window, unable to sleep. "Do you think he'll ever accept me for who I am?" Linda came over and sat down next to her son. "I don't know, dear. Your father changed in prison. He became obsessed. He used to be just stubborn, but now he's dangerous," Alex finished. "Maybe, but you have to remember that no matter what happens, I love you. and so do a lot of people in Hartwell. Reverend Walker, Mrs. Jenkins, even Detective Coleman. You're not alone. Alex hugged his mother. For the first time in many months, he felt that there was no wall of misunderstanding between them. The crisis had brought them closer together, showing that family ties can be stronger than prejudice. But somewhere in the darkness of the October night, the man who was once his father was preparing for a meeting that would change everything forever. Thursday, October 25th. 10 days had passed since the escape, and Hartwell was beginning to return to his normal routine. Detective Coleman received a message from the state police that Rona Carter had been seen at a bus station in Macon, heading north. Surveillance cameras had captured a man resembling the fugitive buying a ticket to Tennessee. "It looks like he's really decided to leave the state," Sarah Lynn Carter said on the phone. "But we're continuing the search and maintaining precautions." Alex returned to work at the Magnolia Cafe 3 days ago. Mrs. Jenkins insisted that he finish his shifts no later than 8 p.m. and always walked him to the bus stop. Local police increased patrols on the main streets, especially in the evening. "You still look scared, young man," Mrs. Jenkins said as Alex took orders from regular customers. "Maybe you should take a couple more days off?" "No, Mrs. Jenkins. Work helps me take my mind off things," Alex replied, pouring coffee for elderly Mr. Harris. That Thursday, Alex had a late shift until 9 in the evening because Jamie, the second shift, had come down with the flu. The cafe closed at 9:30, and the last hour was usually quiet, with only regulars coming in for takeaway coffee. At 8:30, Reverend Walker walked in. He had been dropping by a lot lately to check on Alex. "How are you feeling, son?" the pastor asked, ordering his usual black coffee without sugar. "Better. Mom says the police think my father left the state. Maybe everything will be all right. Let's pray that it will be." Walker paused, studying the young man's face. "Alex, you know you can come to me anytime, right? If you need someone to talk to or just some help." "I know, Reverend. Thank you for everything." After the pastor left, the cafe grew quiet. Alex began clearing tables and preparing to close. At 9 o'clock, the last customer walked in, a truck driver passing through town. He drank his coffee, bought a sandwich, and drove on. Mrs. Jenkins went home at 8:30, as usual, leaving Alex to close up the cafe. She lived only 2 blocks away, and he promised to call her when he was ready to leave so she could walk him to the bus stop. At 9:20, Alex finished cleaning up, turned off the coffee machine, and began counting the takings. Outside, Maple Street was almost deserted, with only a few cars passing by on their way to the suburbs. Streetlights cast a yellowish glow on the sidewalks, creating long shadows between the buildings. After closing the cash register and checking the locks on the back door, Alex turned off the lights and left the cafe through the front door. He locked the door, checked the lock twice, as Mrs. Jenkins had taught him, and took out his phone to call her. "Alex?" she answered after the first ring. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'm done. I'm on my way to the bus stop. Wait for me, dear. I'm leaving the house." "Don't worry. It's only 3 blocks to the stop. Everything's fine." "Alex!" The elderly woman's voice sounded alarmed. "Really, everything's fine. The police car drove by 5 minutes ago. Goodbye." Alex hung up and walked down Maple Street toward the bus stop. The October evening was cool, but not cold. He walked quickly, his hands in his jacket pockets. The street was filled with the special quiet of a small southern town. All he could hear was the sound of his footsteps on the asphalt and the distant hum of cars on the main road. After walking 2 blocks, Alex turned onto Cherry Street, a shorter way to the bus stop. This street was even more deserted, with tall oak trees on both sides, their crowns almost touching, creating a dark tunnel. The streetlights were fewer here, and between them were gaps of darkness. He had walked half a block when he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, Alex saw the silhouette of a man about 30 meters away. The stranger was walking in the same direction, unhurried but keeping pace. Alex quickened his step. His heart began to beat faster, not from fear but from the instinctive caution he had developed over the past few days. The footsteps behind him also quickened. When he reached the intersection with Oak Avenue, Alex stopped under a streetlight and turned around. The man was approaching. and now his face was visible in the yellowish light. Alex didn't recognize him. He was a thin, middle-aged man in a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled down over his eyes. "Excuse me," said the stranger when the distance between them was reduced to a few meters. "Can you tell me how to get to the central square?" The voice sounded familiar to Alex, but he couldn't place it. "Go back to Maple Street and go straight ahead. You can't miss it." "Thanks." The man didn't move, studying Alex. "Are you from around here?" "Yes." Alex felt uneasy. Something about the stranger's behavior was wrong. "I have to go." "Wait." His voice became firmer. "I know you. You work at the cafe on Maple Street." Alex nodded, taking a step back. "Yes, I do. And you are?" "My name is Bill Harrison. I'm a friend of your family." The man took off his baseball cap, and Alex saw his face clearly. It seemed vaguely familiar, but he still couldn't remember where he had seen this man before. "A family friend?" Alex frowned. "I don't remember." "We haven't met in person, but I've heard a lot about you from a—" The man paused. "From mutual acquaintances, especially about the changes in you." The tone of his voice changed, becoming colder. Alex felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. His instinct told him to run, but his legs felt like lead. "What changes?" he asked, though he already had a pretty good idea where this was going. "Don't pretend you don't understand." The man took a step forward. "You were a girl, Amy, and now you're playing a boy." Alex took another step back. "I'm not playing, I'm Alex, and I have to go." "No." His voice became harsh and commanding. "We need to talk, seriously." "About what?" Alex looked around for a way to escape. The nearest houses were 50 meters away and the bus stop was even further. "About what you're doing to yourself, about how you're disgracing the family, about how this has to stop. Who are you to decide?" Alex tried to sound firm, but his voice betrayed him. The man smiled, but there was nothing kind about it. "I'm someone who understands what it means to be a real man, unlike you. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." "I know enough." The stranger took something metal out of his jacket pocket, a wrench or a crowbar. "I know you're a sick girl who thinks she can change what God created." Alex saw the weapon in the man's hand and instinctively recoiled. "What do you want?" "I want you to stop this game. Take off those men's clothes, grow your hair out, stop taking those devilish hormones." His voice grew more aggressive. "I want Amy Carter back." "Amy never existed," Alex shouted. "I've always been Alex. Always." The blow came so fast that Alex didn't have time to dodge it. The man hit him in the face with his hand, and the young man flew back against a lamppost. "Don't you dare say that," the stranger growled. "Amy was a beautiful girl until you were poisoned by these modern perversions." Alex tried to get up, holding onto the lamppost. Blood was running down his lip. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" "I need you to understand." The man approached with a crowbar in his hand. "Understand that you're doing the wrong thing, that you're destroying a family, dishonoring the memory of your ancestors, insulting God." "I'm not doing anything wrong!" Alex tried to get around his attacker, but the man blocked his way. "Nothing wrong?" His voice became almost hysterical. "You're killing your daughter! You're turning a beautiful girl into an ugly boy! I'm not killing anyone! I'm just living! That's not living! It's disgusting!" Alex made a sudden lunge, trying to outrun the man and get to the road where cars could pass. But the stranger was faster and stronger. He grabbed Alex by the jacket and pushed him back with force. "You won't leave until you understand!" he shouted. "Until you promise to change!" "I have nothing to change!" Alex tried to break free, but the grip was too strong. "You have something to change! Everything can be changed! Stop taking hormones, go back to wearing women's clothes, find a good husband! Never!" Alex pushed his attacker away with desperate force. The man stumbled, but quickly regained his balance. His face was contorted with rage. "Never? So you're completely lost?" "I'm not lost, I found myself!" "No!" The stranger barked and swung the crowbar. "If you can't be fixed, then—" Alex saw the weapon raised above his head and instinctively raised his arms to defend himself. "Wait! We can talk! It's too late to talk!" The blow landed on Alex's head, The young man fell to his knees, the world spinning before his eyes. "Please," he whispered, trying to focus his gaze. Warm liquid ran down his face. The man stood over him, breathing heavily. In the light of the lantern, his face looked distorted, almost insane. "Why wouldn't you listen? Why did you make me?" "I didn't make you." Alex tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't obey him. "You made me! You persisted in your sin! You refused to repent!" The man raised the crowbar again. "If my daughter can't be saved..." The second blow was harder than the first. Alex fell onto his back, staring up at the dark sky through the treetops. The stars twinkled far, far away, and he thought they were very beautiful. "Mom," he whispered, feeling his strength leaving him. "Reverend Walker, Mrs. Jenkins." The man knelt down next to the dying young man. His face now expressed not rage, but boundless grief. "Amy," he said quietly. "My little Amy, why didn't you want to come back?" Alex tried to say something, but blood flowed from his mouth. He saw the face leaning over him and recognized it in the last seconds of his life. He recognized it despite the changes brought about by years of prison and hatred. "Dad," was the last word he uttered. Ron Carter sat on the cold asphalt next to his child's body, holding the bloody crowbar in his hands. He cried, for the first time in many years, and repeated the same words over and over. "I wanted to save you. I wanted my daughter back. Why didn't you let me save you?" But Alex could no longer answer. The 19-year-old young man who had fought his whole life for the right to be himself lay motionless under the streetlight on the deserted street in Hartwell. His struggle was over. A few minutes later, Ron stood up, wiped his face with his sleeve, and looked at what he had done. He threw the tire iron into the bushes next to the sidewalk. Then he slowly walked away, disappearing into the darkness between the trees. Cherry Street was quiet again. Only the wind rustled the oak leaves and a dog barked somewhere in the distance. And under the yellow light of the street lamp lay a young man who wanted only one thing: the right to live his life. His phone rang in his jacket pocket. It was Mrs. Jenkins, worried that he wasn't answering her calls. But Alex would never answer a phone call again. Half an hour later, Officer Thompson's patrol car turned onto Cherry Street for another round of neighborhood patrol. The headlights illuminated a figure lying on the ground, and the police officer slammed on the brakes. "Dispatch, this is Thompson. I need an ambulance and Detective Coleman to Cherry Street, between Oak Avenue and Maple. We have a body." Hartwell would never be the same again. Friday, October 26th, 6 a.m. Detective Sarah Coleman stood at the crime scene while the forensic team finished their work. Alex's body had already been taken to the morgue, but yellow tape still cordoned off the area on Cherry Street. The autumn dawn slowly illuminated the place where a young life had been cut short just a few hours earlier. "What do we have?" Sarah asked forensic technician David Mitchell, who was supervising the examination of the crime scene. "2 strong blows to the head with a blunt object," Mitchell replied, studying his notes. "The first blow was to the temple, the second to the back of the head. Judging by the nature of the injuries, the weapon was metal, possibly a crowbar or a large wrench." "Found the murder weapon?" "Not yet, but we've only just started searching within a 100-meter radius. We also found signs of a struggle. The victim tried to defend himself." Mitchell pointed to the blood on the asphalt. "There are drops of blood 2 meters from the main scene. The killer may have been injured as well." Sarah looked around. The nearest houses were 50 meters away, hidden behind tall trees. At this time of night, few people could have seen or heard anything. "Any witnesses?" "None so far. Officer Thompson has interviewed the residents of the nearest houses. No one heard anything, but we're continuing to go door to door." Sarah's phone rang. It was Linda Carter. "Detective Coleman, is it true? Is Alex really?" The woman's voice was shaking. "Mrs. Carter, I'm very sorry. Yes, your son died last night." There was a long pause, then a stifled sob. "Was it Ron? Did he do it?" "We're investigating all possibilities. Can you come to the station to give a statement?" "Of course. I'll be there in an hour." Sarah hung up the phone and turned to Deputy Johnson. "Set up roadblocks on all roads leading out of the county. If Ron Carter is still here, he may try to flee now that he knows we're looking for him for murder." At the station, Sarah began to draw up an investigation plan. She wrote the names of all the potential suspects on the board. Ron Carter, runaway father, motive obvious. Unknown enemies of transgender people from the city, random mugger, although nothing was stolen. Mrs. Jenkins was the first to give a statement. The elderly woman cried as she recounted her last conversation with Alex. He called me at 9:35 p.m. and said he was done with work and was on his way to the bus stop. I offered to walk him there, but he refused, saying everything was fine. She wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. If only I had insisted. If only I had gone with him. It's not your fault, Sarah said gently. Tell me again about the man who came last week asking about Alex. He was of average height, thin, with dark hair under a baseball cap. He spoke with a northern accent. He asked how Amy was doing, and when I corrected him that his name was Alex, he looked at me strangely. Sarah wrote down every word. Can you describe that strange look? Angry, like I said something wrong, and he clenched his fists when I said Alex's name. This was an important clue. Perhaps the stranger had been conducting reconnaissance before the attack. Next to arrive was Linda Carter. The woman looked 10 years older. She brought with her a box of letters from her husband. Detective, I should have shown you these letters earlier. In the last few months, Ron wrote increasingly frightening things. Sarah read several letters. In one dated March, Ron wrote, "If Amy doesn't stop this game voluntarily, force will have to be used. A father has the right to save his child from sin by any means necessary." In a letter from July, I have studied methods of correcting such deviations. The main thing is to show firmness, no compromises, no weakness. And in the last letter, sent a week before his escape, I will be home soon, and I will bring our Amy back. If necessary, I will make her forget these perversions. A dead daughter is better than a living son who is a pervert. Mrs. Carter, this is a direct threat of murder. Why didn't you go to the police? Linda cried. I thought he was just angry, letting off steam. I didn't believe he was capable of killing his own child. Where do you think your ex-husband might be hiding? I don't know. He has some old friends in the mountains of northern Georgia, but they may not know he's on the run, or he may try to get to Florida, to his brother. Sarah wrote down all the contact information. It was important to find Ron quickly, before he disappeared for good. At noon, Detective Mitchell called with important news. Detective, we found the murder weapon, a 30-centimeter crowbar, discarded in the bushes 20 meters from the crime scene. It has the victim's blood and partial fingerprints on it. Can the prints be identified? We're working on it. We also found a baseball cap in the bushes, dark blue, with the logo of Carter and Son Auto Repair. There's hair inside. We're sending it for DNA analysis. Sarah felt adrenaline rush through her body. Carter and Son was Ron Carter's old auto repair shop. The evidence pointed directly to the killer. But they had to find Ron himself. Sarah coordinated with police in neighboring counties and states. A description of Ron Carter was sent out across the South. That evening, a call came in from the owner of a motel 30 miles from Hartwell. Detective, a man named Bill Harrison stayed here. He paid cash and left early this morning. But the girl at the front desk said he looked a lot like the photo in the description. We'll be there in half an hour. Don't let anyone into that room. At the Pine Tree Motel, Sarah and the crime scene investigators searched room 15. They found a Bible with passages about parental duty underlined, photos of Alex as a child, and recent pictures taken with a hidden camera. In one photo, Alex was leaving a cafe. In another, he was walking down the street. He was watching his son, Sarah told Mitchell. He planned this murder. In the bathroom, they found a blood-stained shirt and traces of attempts to wash the blood off his hands. DNA analysis would confirm it, but it was already clear. Ron Carter had killed his son. Saturday, October 27th. Alex's funeral was an event that divided Hartwell. Reverend Walker insisted on holding the service at the Methodist Church, despite protests from some of the congregation. Alex was a good man, he said in his sermon. He never hurt anyone, he just wanted to live according to his true nature. God judges us not by our appearance, but by our hearts. More than 100 people attended the funeral. Mrs. Jenkins, Dr. Martinez, many college students, and even some of the cafe's customers were there. But there was also a noticeable group of opponents standing outside the church with signs calling for divine justice. Linda Carter looked devastated. She chose a simple wooden coffin for her son and asked that he be buried under the name Alex Carter, the name he had chosen for himself. Sunday, October 28th. The call came at 6:30 in the morning. Ron Carter had been arrested at a bus station in Tallahassee, Florida. He had tried to buy a ticket to Miami under a false name, but an alert ticket agent recognized him from a description. He didn't resist arrest, a Florida detective reported. He was sitting in the waiting room crying. When we approached him, he said, "I knew you would come. I killed my daughter." Sarah immediately flew to Tallahassee to accompany Ron back to Georgia. In the holding cell, she saw the murderer for the first time. Ron Carter had aged 20 years. His hair was gray, his face gaunt, his eyes expressionless. He sat on the cot, staring at the wall. "Mr. Carter, I'm Detective Coleman. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the murder of your son." "Daughter," Ron corrected quietly. "I killed my daughter. Alex was your son." "No!" Ron raised his head sharply. "Amy was my daughter, a beautiful little girl, and this monster killed her. He took my daughter and turned her into a freak." Sarah turned on the tape recorder. "Tell us what happened on Thursday night." Ron began to speak, and his confession was complete and detailed. He told how he had planned his escape from prison, how he had watched his son for a week, how he had hoped to persuade him to return to his female role. "I didn't want to kill him," he said, staring at the floor. "I just wanted to make him understand, to make him return to a normal life, but he refused. He said he would never be Amy." "And then you hit him with a crowbar?" "I just lost control. I realized that my daughter was dead forever, that this stranger had killed her for good." Ron began to cry. "Better a dead daughter than a living pervert. That's what the Bible says." "The Bible doesn't say to kill children, Mr. Carter." "It does if a child disobeys his father, if he sins against nature. I saved her soul from eternal damnation." Sarah turned off the tape recorder. She had obtained a full confession, but that didn't make it any easier. Sitting in front of her was a broken man who had killed his own child in the name of a twisted understanding of religion. Monday, October 29th. The courtroom was packed with more people than it could hold. Ron Carter was brought in handcuffed for a preliminary hearing. The charges were serious: first-degree murder, escape from custody, and illegal possession of a weapon. Ron's court-appointed lawyer, a young lawyer named David Clark, tried to get him declared insane. "Your Honor, my client was in a state of mental disorder caused by religious fanaticism. He sincerely believed that he was saving the child's soul." District Attorney James Wilson was categorical. "Your Honor, this was a cold-blooded, premeditated murder. The defendant followed the victim for a week, prepared the murder weapon, and deliberately lured the boy to a deserted location. Judge Harrison, the same judge who was supposed to hear Alex's name change case, ordered a mental health evaluation for Ron and sent him to jail to await trial. The case received widespread coverage in the local media. TV crews from Atlanta sent film crews, and journalists interviewed Hartwell residents. The town was divided into two camps. "Ron Carter is a murderer, and no excuses can save him," Linda Carter told reporters. "He killed a beautiful young man because of his prejudices." But Mr. Howell and his supporters held a different view. Ron was trying to save a child from sin. Yes, he went too far, but his intentions were right. Reverend Walker held special memorial services for Alex, speaking of God's love for all his children. But old Pastor Davis wrote letters to the local newspaper supporting Ron's actions as defending Christian values. A month later, a psychiatric evaluation found Ron sane at the time of the crime. He was diagnosed with severe personality disorder with religious delusions, but this did not exempt him from criminal responsibility. The trial began on January 15th and lasted 2 weeks. Sarah gave detailed testimony about the investigation and provided all the evidence. The defense tried to prove that Ron had acted in the heat of the moment, but the evidence of planning was too obvious. Linda Carter gave the most powerful testimony. "My ex-husband killed our son not out of love, but out of hatred. He couldn't accept that Alex was a good person, just not the person his father wanted him to be." On January 30th, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. Judge Harrison sentenced Ron Carter to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ron showed no emotion when the sentence was read. He sat motionless, staring into space. As he was led away, he uttered only one sentence: "I'll see my daughter in heaven." March 2025. Detective Sarah Coleman stood in the cemetery next to Alex Carter's grave. The simple granite headstone was engraved with the words, "Alex Carter, 2005 to 2024, beloved son who had the courage to be himself." The first spring flowers planted by Linda were growing next to the grave. She came here regularly, sometimes with Reverend Walker, sometimes alone. "I think about him every day," Linda told Sarah when they met at the grave. "I wonder what his life would have been like if he had been able to leave this town." "He would have been happy," Sarah replied. "He found himself despite all the obstacles. That's a lot." Linda sold her house in Hartwell and moved to Savannah to live with her sister. She couldn't live in the town where her son had died. The Magnolia Cafe closed. Mrs. Jenkins couldn't work after the tragedy. Reverend Walker stayed in Hartwell, continuing to serve and preach tolerance, but half of his congregation left the church, disagreeing with his position. The diocese transferred him to another city in the spring. Hartwell slowly healed its wounds. The Alex Carter case was a turning point. The town realized what blind hatred could lead to. But change came slowly, one generation at a time.